The UN says Israel killed civilians hiding in schools and shelters during its 2014 military campaign in Gaza. 44 people were killed as Israeli fighter jets bombed UN-controlled buildings. Now, the organization also lashed out at Hamas, which used some sites to hide arms. But there were no weapons in the attacked premises, and those buildings where ammunition was found were said to be empty by the United Nations. Well, joining me in the now is Yoav Kish, who's a member of the Knesset from the Likud party. Thank you so much for joining us. Hamas militants indeed did use UN buildings to hide arms, according to this report. But the report also says that they were empty. Why did the Israeli army hit schools full of people instead of these warehouses with weapons?
The Israeli army did all what he can in order to avoid hitting innocent people. We are putting a lot of effort in this process, and every target that has been attacked is being considered. There was no intention to hit in any time these cases, but the problem is that the Hamas is doing two things. First, he's attacking our civilians without any problem. For him, that's a legitimate target. So he's shooting on our cities and around people. And also, not only that, he's using the UN sites to hide weapons and do war activity from them. So once we see a launch of a rocket from these places, they become a target. And the Hamas is using his own people as a live shield in order to protect himself. I can assure you the Israeli army is a moral army. We're doing to avoid these incidents, and if it happened, it was an accident, it will be integrated by the army and their conclusions will be taken out of it.
The IDF
there was nothing done in purpose. Everything.
The IDF is using fighter jets in civilian areas. Obviously, there's going to be damages because it's not precise targeting. How does the weighing of this go? I mean, are these civilians collateral damage when the IDF sits down and decides where to bomb?
The IDF is looking at the area and trying to identify where did the Hamas launch his rockets in order to stop them from launching the rockets. And once we identify a point that this is where it was done, we see where it is, and we're using minimal damage in order to have minimal collateral damage around it. But
so it
since
doesn't
the Hamas
matter how many
is doing what
civilians
he
are in
wants
this area.
The most sensitive area. No, of course it matters, and sometimes we cancel attacks and we find ourselves, that's what they're doing. They know that we won't attack them, so that's why they're doing it. I'll give you another example. We have a city called Ashkelon. There's a hospital there, it's next to Gaza, and in this hospital, not only that the Hamas target the city and the hospital in particular, this hospital is also used to help injured Palestinians. And on the other hand, if you look at the hospital in Gaza, the most highly ranked officers of the Hamas hide in their hospital because they knew we're not going to attack it. So that's just an example for the difference between Israel, which is doing all what it can to avoid these casualties, and the Hamas that is doing all what it can to create these casualties.
Okay, you say, fair enough, and we're not condoning Hamas here in any sense. Fair enough, we're taking all of your points. But the UN report specifically says that the buildings, specifically these schools and shelters in which 44 people were killed, did not have Hamas weapons in them. Why were they hit?
I think you need to read the report, because even Ban Ki-moon, the UN Secretary General, says, and I'm quoting, he is amazed that the Hamas used UNRWA buildings to put weapons inside them. And that's
but
his
he
quote.
Also,
so
I read
you should
the report,
go into the report and find it.
We did find it. Ban Ki-moon, and I quote, they do say that the buildings in which they actually found weapons did not have civilians inside. Those buildings were empty. They do condemn Hamas for housing weapons in those buildings at all, but the buildings that were hit with civilians were empty. These are the words of the UN report.
Listen, the war, it's something that we all try to avoid. And unfortunately, there is collateral damage. What I can assure you that Israel is doing the utmost effect and the most that we can do to avoid it. And we cancel attacks when we find that there's civilians around. And that's why the Hamas is using it. Now this report that you're looking at is being done after the attacks. You can't see who are the Hamas terrorists that they were hit when they were there. I can assure you one thing, that Israel never will do something to hurt civilians. We're doing all what we can to avoid it. On the other hand, the Hamas is doing the other way around. So, unfortunately, I'm not saying sometimes in a war it can happen. You can see what happened not long ago to the Americans when they bombed in Afghanistan. This is not being done with no judgment. It's done with full judgment, with a lot of care, including canceling attacks. And unfortunately, sometimes civilians do get hurt in the war. We do all what we can to avoid it.
The IDF says that over 3,000 rockets were fired from Gaza between July 8th and August 6th last summer. According to the Army's figures, almost 40,000 tank shells, 35,000 artillery shells, and 4.8 million bullets were supplied to the IDF during the fighting. Is this a fair fight against Hamas? They have no army.
Listen, we're not talking now about fairness. We want to win, and we want to hit those who are killing and trying to hit our civilians. I'm not justifying anything in looking in ammunition. What does it got to do with it? If somebody tries to kill my people, I won't let him. And I'll do it with the most careful not to hit civilians. But if I can have another 100 airplanes, another 100 tanks, I will use them, because I don't want to get my civilians hurt. They're not doing any calculation. They're just shooting rockets to the most concentrated areas of our civilians. What do you want us to do? Just look at them and say, hi, let's see if it hits or not?
Benjamin Netanyahu's spokesperson, Mark Regev, we got him on the phone today, and he told us that he's not commenting on the matter. Why do you think there's no comments being made on these UN figures?
I can tell you one thing, that we have a long history. For example, take the Goldstein report that was done on a few years ago on another conflict with Gaza. And that gave Israel a very bad perspective. And few years after, Goldstein himself said that he was misled and the information he get from Gaza was wrong. And if he knew what he knows now, he would never publish such a report. So our experience is very bad with the UN inquiries. Even now you can see that the truth has come out, and it says obviously that the Hamas is using civilians as human shield, is using UNRWA and UN shelters to hide weapons and to use war activity against us, and it's all out there. The thing is that this never goes out, and always is, and it's true, Israel is a much stronger country in the sense of having a much stronger army, but still they are provoking us, they are hitting our civilians, and they are targeting our civilians with no care. If they just look to kill them as more children and women as they can.
Yoav Kish, member of the Knesset from Likud party, thanks so much for being with us in the Now.